is CNN.
Hello and welcome to our Thursday show, a hot show for you today. Later this hour, will more money solve the nation's drug problem, or should we try a new approach? Legalize drugs and eliminate the downside of prohibition. We'll take to the battle lines on that topic. Also, neurologists pinpoint a gene believed responsible for the emotionally painful and disfiguring disease, neurofibromatosis, and we'll meet a woman who has the disease. She's helping in the research. Also with us, neurologist Alan Rubenstein. The free and uncensored exchange of ideas is one of the most precious freedoms protected by the Constitution. The First Amendment allows us to worship the God of our choice. It allows books to be written, movies to be made, and songs to be sung with or without government approval. But some people say First Amendment rights are being abused and for the good of all should be limited. Among the issues are flag burning, obscene art, pornographic films and books, and some music. And joining us today to discuss whether the First Amendment is in jeopardy are Edward Lawson, Executive Director of Pro-Per Incorporated, a think tank that supports the Bill of Rights, and California Representative Robert K. Dornan, who believes that the First Amendment is in more danger from abuse than from erosion. Gentlemen, welcome. And Representative Dornan, let's begin with you and ask you why you think that it is in more danger from abuse than erosion.
Well, let me personalize this, Sonia. I've got a little copy of the Constitution around here. I carry it over my heart as Sam Ervin did, the great senator now deceased who became famous in the Watergate period. The fact that that First Amendment is undergoing unbelievable reinterpretation makes me reflect personally back to when I was a boy in grade school, high school, college, Air Force, my professional career as a broadcaster in Los Angeles. And I would apply this to you, Sonia. Did we think the First Amendment was limited, restricted, abused because it wasn't made to cover burning the stars and stripes in front of Gold Star mothers? Or as the ACLU wants to do, cover child pornography's distribution? Not the manufacturer, just protected once it's made, this rotten stuff. Did we think it would cover snuff films or the obscenity and misogynist, women-hating dialogue of Andrew Dice Clay or the group Two Live Crew? And besides, it's not being applied to them anyway. Obscenity laws are being applied to them. Local obscenity laws which have been upheld by the Supreme Court in every single case for 200 years, 200.5 years.
Well, then how would you respond to that, Mr. Lawson? I mean, how do you see it being eroded when there's so much that we really can do and there may be some things that are not for the public good?
Well, I think the critical question here is not where we are in terms of the maintenance of free speech, not where we are in terms of the assurance of the freedom to worship as one chooses, not where we are, but the direction in which the Constitution is going. I think that what you're seeing here is basically a false alarm. Those who maintain that there is a constitutional crisis in censorship, those who maintain that there is an epidemic in obscenity, invariably fall into two very interesting classes of people. On the one hand, you have people who are religious zealots, people who hold very deeply held religious convictions, but from those convictions, which they are permitted to hold by the guarantees of the First Amendment of the Federal Constitution, they have decided that they are, in fact, God's chosen ones, and they can tell you what you should do for religion. They can tell you what you can see, what you can read, what you can write. What we are fundamentally looking at here is an attempt on the part of a religious fanatical group to impose their religion as the state religion, their values as an amendment to the Constitution.
Mr. Lawson, let me stop you with that.
Absolute garbage. Absolute, horrendous, offensive, arrogant garbage. Any parent, even if they've never been in a church in their life, if they were raised as an agnostic, who think that it is absurd to have the ACLU claim that child pornography is constitutionally protected free speech, to be called a zealot by Pro-Per is offensive to the extreme.
Well, let me go perhaps ladies and gentlemen, a step further. I said that there are two
God, how
groups.
can you?
Well, if you in fact cease to censor my attempt to explain myself, I will show you.
No, go ahead.
Thank you,
Please,
sir.
go
You're
ahead.
very gracious.
Thank
You're
you.
kind. I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, there are two groups who have sounded this false alarm, this sense that there is somehow a cataclysmic plague of obscenity, that there is a need to amend the Constitution because of a crisis in the First Amendment.
Nobody wants to amend it. Nobody wants to amend it. I don't know one member of the House or Senate wants to amend the First Amendment.
This is an example of censorship. Let me try again to finish what I was starting to say without the gracious intervention of our vocal colleague in Washington. The second group of people who are sounding this false alarm, this false crisis, are professional politicians. Professional politicians who are failing in terms of their campaign promises. Professional politicians who are failing in the upcoming election, wherever it is in their particular state, their particular congressional, senatorial, or even presidential election. Professional politicians who are standing in the door or the shadow of indictment or investigation. What the second group of people are doing is bringing up this crisis as an opportunity to camouflage their own failings. They are bringing it up as a decoy to draw
Mr. Lawson, let me stop you and widen your
from
point.
The
Mr.
real
Lawson,
issue.
if I may, let me get a word in here. I'd like to widen the point and ask you, Representative Dorn, there are some people who suggest that this has become a critical issue today as a way of distracting the public from larger issues, the S&L crisis, the budget deficit, a number of issues that have run so far out of control that it's much easier to take the public to something discrete and manageable, to give a sense of controlling and being in the public interest.
Right,
Could you share your views on that, Representative Dorn?
Sonia, that's a fair question. And when the press first started to bring it up, it was generally applied to flag burning. And they said we have better things to do. But I'm in the minority in the Congress, and that's also a minority in the Senate, the Republican Party. And we didn't come in any Mondays or Fridays to work, let alone Saturdays. We took a long July 4th break, longer than I can recall in 14 years. So that gave the lie, well, not the lie, but it showed the press they were wrong. We've got plenty of time. We've got a 5-week break coming up here in about a week. If we want to handle the budget problems and the S&L crisis, and I'm very fortunate I've taken no S&L money, I'm clean as a hound's tooth, I'd stay through August on that issue, but that doesn't mean that we can't participate in the NEA debate. Now, I don't know if Pro Per is aware of this, Ed's group, but there is no talk about censoring the dead Mapplethorpe's, Robert Mapplethorpe's exhibits if they're privately funded. We have our control over every dollar that goes out of the Congress. We're supposed to, whether it was to help cover up the S&L crisis or whether it's telling a defense contractor, you build the kind of plane we want, not what you want. But when we have the District of Columbia University putting at $1,600,000 an art exhibit in a school that's going bankrupt and can't pay its teachers, that is a large life-size dining room table with 39 plates with female genitalia on it in 3D ceramic color, and it was created with NEA funds, $36,500 worth 11 years ago, and now it's making a comeback. That's an issue being pushed in our face. The NEA issue is not censorship. It's whether or not taxpayers who find it offensive, what Mr. Ed calls zealots, that's the issue. What we do with tax dollars.
Mr. Ed is a horse. My name is Edward Lawson.
Mr. Lawson, I'm going to ask if you would just take pause for a moment. Mr. Lawson, we are going to go to our audience to include them, but while we do, I want you to think of this question. George Will had a fascinating article in which he juxtapositioned some of the testimony at the Central Park jogger trial along with the 2 live crew words and asked a question. Does artistry, in effect, impact upon human behavior, and is it possible that a group may really have a call to violence, and should the public sanction that in any way? And when we continue, that is a question I'd like you to consider, and I'm going to ask you to respond to. Here's our number for our audience. We're talking about First Amendment rights, 212-714-7810. Call us.